can start right now. And yes, so hello all, my name is Jonathan Vita. I'm the director of the Master's and PhD program of Unimar, University of Marília. And we have tried to do internationalization and virtualization of our program precisely on this pandemic, and we're trying to do it in a creative and new way. So the idea is not to have the offline world be only transposed to the online world, but the idea is really to engage our students doing open classes and giving back to the community as a university, something that they can rely on every week to have information and have really great knowledge. So this is the actual idea behind all those projects. And the Fridays project is normally closely connected to some classes that we have on taxation of the University of Marília. We have a study group, and we have also many people that have those interests and are researching that within the University of Marília. So, and the idea of this project is to bring forth budget law, tax law, economics, development, everything together through precisely the idea within the pandemic. And here we have the idea of highly digitalized companies, taxation in the pandemic times, in the COVID times. And this is an idea that me and Raffaele, we went back and forth, and this is the idea that we came up with. And I'm really glad to receive all of you. Marcos Livio, which has been really a great partner in many initiatives, especially in our group to the jornadas that I know that will happen probably online, the jornadas of the Superior Court of Justice in Brazil. Liziane, which is a really I have to say old partner in many academic endeavors. We have been together many times on discussions of dissertations, of PhDs, of everything that you can imagine. I gave classes when she was teaching in Brasilia, and so she has been to Marília, so this is a really fruitful partnership. And Raffaele, which I have to say, we have been friends for over 13 years now. I did the math, Raffaele. So it's been over 13 years at Bocconi University.
We met when we were 5, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, precisely. And yeah, we have been collaborating since then. So it was always Raffaele, Alessandro Turina, and many others that I really enjoyed that they have been developing in the taxation world. And I really believe that we have a really great event coming up. So therefore I give the floor to Marcos Livio for his presentation, and then Raffaele, then Liziane, then me. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. So it's a great pleasure speaking with Raffaele. It's not the first time, and I think that we will have many meetings like that in order to improve the research of international taxation in Brazil. I'd like to thank you, Jonathan and Liziane, for inviting me for this live. Jonathan is someone really connected with international taxation, and he's always thinking about how to improve the studies or researching of international taxation. This is a great opportunity for studying digitalized economy. Everything is running in this time, and it's not smoothly movements. Everything is running really hard and complex in terms of how to legislate in terms of digital economy. So don't be worried about not understanding some issues that will be addressed in this first part of the section. Certainly, Professor Raffaele will be really skilled in terms of amending me and correcting me in terms of concepts, issues, and especially the correlation between transfer pricing and permanent stable concepts and the unified approach. My main focus today will be analyzing the unified approach from OECD. Basically, I would like to address some issues regarding Pillar 1, and then how Pillar 1 will be related with transfer pricing, and how to understand what amount A, amount B, and amount C can mean. In terms of complexity, I think that this is the most complex reform of the international tax system that OECD has tried. We have never seen such
I think Livio has frozen up, or is it my impression?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's wait for 20 seconds or something like that. Yeah, he's not working at all. Yeah. No, but this is really, we have all the videos online stating, I don't know if you've seen the video that everyone is in a meeting room or something like that. Yeah. Livio, yeah. Your microphone is off. Yeah.
All right. Someone is refurbishing the house alongside me, and there are too much noise. I'm so sorry. And I have a fight with the guy, but there's no solution. Even in the COVID, people wants to be reforming their house, and this is something incredible. Let's try. So the main approach will be Pillar 1. This is the unified approach. And for a small overview, first of all, I'd like to highlight how OECD is moving on in terms of legislation. And maybe Raffaele could say something about European Union approach regarding digital service tax and unilateral measures. Even not following unilateral measures as the main approach, OECD is aware about what to do if a long-term approach not succeed in terms of reforms, and there is a plan B in terms of using unilateral approach by countries. Even OECD is saying that it's not possible. And there is something really interesting to be discussed regarding US approach. This week especially, the US governments, the US Treasury said that they will put this discussion on hold because it's really unfair taxing just American companies. And this is something that is to be debatable in terms of, without the support of the United States, probably Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 will not going on. And concluding remarks, that is some questions and some issues that can be posed in terms of how to cope transfer price guidelines and the concept of permanent establishment that has been established in the OECD commentaries and in BEPS projects with this new approach in Pillar 1. I think that it's something really challenging in terms of how to manage a new approach regarding Pillar 1, going on with the old and traditional concept and framework that is based on arm's length and the principle of permanent establishment. So we are talking about digital economy, taxation of digital economy. When you're thinking about digital economy, we are talking about scale without mass. This is the main characteristic of this new business model. We can thinking about intangibles. The world is changing to intangible world, products, intangible goods, and this is something really new in terms of negotiating and in terms of how to framework the old business model to a new world that is based on intangible and BI. And the last question that is being discussed and the most controversial is the user contribution in data. How considering the contribution of the user and the consumer in terms of value creation. We have already had an opportunity for discussing this issue with Professor Raffaele, and I think that he will be able to to give some more deeply insights regarding value creation. But at this time, it's really interesting to deliver that. How can we thinking about a new nexus and how to sharing tax base, considering the contribution of the user and the consumer. Another question is how the use of data can change the taxing rights of the countries in terms of the model convention that's based on old principles in terms of the main tax base is to be held on the residents. And this is something that is difficult to couple and is something that OECD is trying to do using the Pillar 1. So if the international taxation is in problem, what we have to do? First question to be answered is, what should we tax? And the second is, how should we tax? The biggest problem is how to share or how to split the cake again, or he splits the cake, considering the use of data and the participation of consumers and the participation of users. It's something really complex, considering that even in the BEPS project, it wasn't the main focus. Action 1, that was one of the actions posed on the BEPS projects by OECD, wasn't focused on changing the way taxing rights is split between countries considering a model convention. And this is something new in terms of approach that OECD is trying to deliver. The main targets of this new business model, the high digitalization companies, are in fact the biggest American companies, and this is the way why the U.S. Treasury said that you put the discussion on hold. We are talking about Amazon, we are talking about Facebook, we are talking about Apple, and we are talking about Google. There is some news regarding Google, at least Google advertisements. The profit of Google currently, for the time being, it's about 80% coming from advertisement. And this has changed the world. This has changed the way business are doing and how to share this new welfare, or how to share this new reality with consumers and especially with developing countries. Brazil is a developing country that has following real solid tax policy in terms of protecting their tax base. First of all, we are based on withholding tax regarding payments for non-residents. We're based on extremely full inclusion CFC legislation. And then how taxing digital economy will affect Brazilian policy and how the works that OECD are trying to deliver could affect Brazil. First of all, I would like to remember some interesting topics regarding taxation of digital economy. The first initiative of OECD was launched in 2015, the BEPS project, and as I said, the main topic regarding the digital economy was Action 1. The time flows, and then even having results regarding the other actions that was included in the BEPS project, we have an interim report in 2018 that wasn't so clear in terms of guidelines to be followed by countries. There wasn't an agreement regarding what to do, and OECD has delivered two main approaches. The first one would be short-term measures that could be agreed by countries, and the second one would be long-term measures in terms of how to have a definitely agreements. Unfortunately, none of them was followed by countries in terms of searching on agreements, and even OECD trying hard to give in some deliveries or to give in some reports, there wasn't no conclusions regards what to do. And in this sense, many short-term measures like unilateral measures was followed by many countries, especially in Europe. And this is the reason why United States is facing this plan of OECD. We could say that United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, France, all of them are thinking about implement a digital service tax. Many of them has already delivered the legislation, and no one knows how will be the application in terms of coordinating this unilateral measure with the guidelines that is trying to be delivered by OECD in terms of Pillar 1. The second issue that could be highlighted is what European Union is doing in terms of legislation, or in order to follow or not follow OECD. Professor Raffaele will be able to highlight many issues regarding European Union initiatives, but we can say that it looks like European Union will not wait OECD agreements in terms of the unified approach, or in terms of how to increase uncertainty or certainty in terms of nexus and tax base. So the main initiative from OECD was to deliver the unified approach in 2019, last year, and OECD is trying to making some spots in terms of commonalities. What could be done in terms of new agreements in order to try to find an approach that could be followed by the majority of countries. We have to say that it's important to highlight that all this work is being followed by the inclusive framework. The inclusive framework that is compounded by more than 100 countries is trying to deliver some questions or some guidelines in terms of unified approach, but even having the inclusive framework working together, there is no consensus, there's no agreement in terms of what to do, especially when we compare developing and developed countries. As the framework that is established by the Model Convention of OECD is based on the permanent establishment principle, when we consider the digital economy and when we are considering the whole of the data and the whole of the consumers, there is no way to couple the old framework with the new framework. And so the starting point is commonality of the proposal on Pillar 1. First, new nexus role not depending on physical presence. And this is the main point. So as the permanent established principle is based on the physical presence, another way to deal with this new nexus would be disconsidering the physical presence. And this is the first commonality. The second one would be the allocation of rights to the user and market jurisdiction, as I have been said. The other one could be go beyond arm's length and departing from the separate entity. And this is the point where Professor Raffaele could strengthen some commonalities or strengthen some parallel concepts that could be in conflict in terms of how to deal with the Pillar 1 in parallel with the old system. And this is something really complex because even trying to launch a new approach regarding nexus and regarding sharing tax base, OECD is based on to maintain the old system. And this means that transfer price guidelines will be used, and PE concept will be used as well at the same time. And this is something that will be really difficult and really complex to couple. And the fourth commonality that is being delivered by OECD, and in this point I can't agree, because OECD is trying to say that this new approach, Pillar 1, is searching for simplicity, stabilization, and certainty. And if I could say something about Pillar 1, I would say that Pillar 1 will increase complexity and uncertainty in terms of what to do. And even more, Pillar 1 is based on three amounts that are amount A, amount B, and amount C. All of this structure is based on large consumer, including facing business, but not only Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. Pillar 1 is focused on targeting as well other high profitable business models that interact with consumers. As I would say, for instance, Airbnb or Uber, even not consider that they are social media, they are a high profitable business that could be included in terms of Pillar 1. And considering that digital economy is the focus, there will be some exclusions. For instance, extractive economy that doesn't have any interaction with consumers would be excluded. Financial activities, financial service would be excluded as well. So how would be the main framework of Pillar 1? First of all, Pillar 1 is based in revenue thresholds. Not all companies would be included in Pillar 1. Not all companies would be submitted to this new approach. It means that there will be a threshold in terms of profits. OECD is trying to couple this threshold with CBC, country by country reports. And there would be some special thresholds for regional business models that could work inside regional groups or regional profitable activities. So, talking about amount A, as I said, current transfer price rules would be going on, and this is the main point. And amount A would apply the concept of residual profits, sharing residual profits to be allocated to market jurisdictions. And what would be residual profits? Residual profit would be the total profit of the group, and this is a new issue that could be discussed. We are not talking about just one company. We are talking about a group of companies, considering that digital economy works with a verticalized business model. So residual profit would be the total profit minus expense. And this is the main concept addressed by OECD. It's really important to understand that OECD hasn't highlighted the details yet. And this is something really uncertainty in terms of new guidelines. When we are discussing new guidelines, it would be really important in having some details. And OECD just pointed out the main idea of the Pillar 1, and many issues would be discussed in terms of what would be the residual profit and how the residual profit would be shared and allocated to market jurisdictions. Another question is how sales to consider, gross sales or gross sales distributed per user, or residual gross income, which proportion of the amount invested in the market jurisdiction, how could we consider labor, assets, and sales in these new thresholds? And there will be many issues that will have to be addressed by OECD before delivering a final report regarding Pillar 1. And considering that what we have already seen, we wouldn't say that we won't have more complexity in terms of sharing the pies, and this is the problem. Another concept that was delivered by OECD would be how to sharing residual profits. And when I'm talking about residual profit, I'm talking about we have to consider that transfer price guidelines will be in line and PE concepts will be working together. And consider that we will have transfer pricing, PE concept, and residual profits. In the end, many developing countries are discussing and questioning how residual profits would be better for them in terms of sharing the taxing base. And this is something that wasn't explained by OECD. Amount B is something that's more targets to discuss. It's an introduction of fixed margins for the remuneration of certain functions such as market and distribution. and the scope would be something like including full-fledged distribution, include all in between, all things that could be considered like marketing and distribution in the marketing countries. So considering that amount B would work in fixed margins like the Brazilian transfer pricing methods, people are questioning about which fixed margin could be used. What would be the pattern? Can we consider, for instance, global industry classification standard? Can we consider European classification standard? What kind of accountability would be used, like US accountability rules or Brazilian GAAP? And something really complex would be deciding what kind of fixed margin would be used. And in the end, going to the end of my presentation, I would like to just highlighting amount C. Amount C would be dispute resolution. As working alongside transfer pricing, permanent establishments, and Pillar 1 working together at the same time, the risk of double taxation will be increased. And to tackle this risk, OECD is working with a strong mechanism of dispute resolution. So this is issues that I would like to address. Certainly, Professor Raffaele will be really skilled for supporting me and helping you to understand everything in a easy way, clear and easy way. And I would like to thank you, Professor Jonathan, for inviting me to speak. Professor Jonathan, if you want to send my email for the students and researchers that are involved with your research in your university, I will be really pleased to respond. And please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcos. It was really nice hearing you, and many interesting points have been made. This laid the foundation upon which Raffaele for sure will develop more upon and talk about the companies and talk about the highly digitized world and the problems that we are facing under the pandemic. Since now we don't know what residence is, we don't know what establishment are. So these are really big discussions on the international trend right now. So you have the floor, Raffaele. Grazie.
So, bon dia, obrigado, Jonathan, for the kind invitation. This is basically all that I can say in Portuguese. So I guess I will go ahead in English. Thanks a lot for the kind invitation. And I think I have around 20 minutes to speak. Please stop me whenever I'm speaking for too long. I think the beauty of this system online is that you can simply mute the person when is talking for too long. This is one of the good features of speaking online. So. Taxation of high digitalized businesses in times of COVID-19 is quite an interesting topic. We could talk for days, and probably we could still not reach any agreement when we discuss this topic. But we'll try to make some remarks in 20 minutes, mostly for your thoughts, for your future discussions as well on the topic. So when we think of this issue, of taxing digitalized businesses, we should not forget that the OECD already started working long time ago on these topics. It was already the beginning of 2000 when the OECD started was working on the issues related to the e-commerce. And in that regard, when it was about whether we should change the allocation rules, the OECD said there is nothing to be changed. I think it's all somehow business as usual. But then in 2013, 2015, as it was already mentioned by Professor Marcus Livio, something has changed. The BEPS project has said, Action 1, we should change something when it comes to digital economy. At that time it was called that way. Why was that changed? Why was that on the table again? Basically, because in 2012 and also in previous years, there were some discussions over aggressive tax planning structures of some multinationals. You might remember the discussions in the UK over some companies being accused of being immoral. Why they were accused of being immoral? Because they were not doing anything illegal. So some companies like Starbucks and other companies were somehow considered to do some aggressive tax planning, and the OECD said we should do something about it. And therefore, BEPS went on. It was completed in 2015 with some final reports. The final report on Action 1 on digital economy was somehow providing a lot of options. It was quite a big report, but it was not providing any definitive solution. So the OECD said we should work on this further. So 2018, 2020, the OECD started providing more guidance, more reports, and some of them were already presented by Professor Marcus Livio. So what is the issue here? Why are we changing? Why are we in the need of changing something compared to what were the conclusions already in 2000? Why we could not have stayed with the conclusions in 2005? Simply because on one hand, we have seen somehow an emergence of what I would call fiscal populism, meaning that many countries, many governments, and also many people from the civil society have started saying tech giants are making a lot of profits, but they are not taxed enough. And the second point, that the market jurisdictions are contributing with a lot of value to these companies, and they are not getting much profits, much tax revenues out of this. There are some misconceptions when it comes to this, and that's why I've called it before fiscal populism, because first of all, the fact that tech giants are making a lot of profits but not paying a lot of taxes, this is false. One thing is the value that these companies have. These companies, there are some companies that have emerged recently, and they have a huge value also in the stock market, but that value is based on expectations that people have that they will make profits in the future. But that does not mean that they are making profits now. A lot of these companies, if you think of businesses like Uber, if you think of businesses like Tesla, these companies are still making losses. So you cannot collect corporate income taxes when a company is making losses. The second point is more taxing rights to the market jurisdictions. And this is something that has become really controversial, whereby countries started saying we should get some part of the taxes paid by these companies because we are contributing to the value. And this is something that we will discuss a little bit later on. On the other hand, a positive side of all this discussion is that it has increased awareness. It has increased awareness by governments, by companies, by academia as well, on all these topics. So it is positive that nowadays, because of all these projects going ahead, people talk more about international taxation. They are more aware of all these issues. They study them more, and therefore, hopefully, we will reach solutions that are much more in line with principles that we all share in international taxation. So, before we start talking about all the issues of the digital economy and the tax implications, I just want to make clear the distinction between various terminologies that we have been using and we are using in today's world, but we are actually making a little bit of confusion. So there are three concepts that I like to highlight here. There's the concept of digitization, the concept of digitalization, and the concept of digital transformation. Digitization means basically that the information that somehow in the past were made in paper, now they are elaborated via computers, they are stored, they are processed, and they are transmitted in different forms, in electronic forms. So think about in the past, for communicating with someone, you would use a normal letter, now you send an email. This is the process that we call digitization. What is the implication of this process is that we have more data. Don't forget that we always been having data. Companies have always been collecting data about their customers. Think of questionnaires that were somehow filled in by customers. Think of also the way that supermarkets get your preferences when they give you a card that gives you some discounts. That card collects data about you, about your preferences. Companies have always been collecting data. In the past years, they just collect much more because of the evolution of technologies. And in the future, they will collect even more than nowadays. So this is digitization, and also it has brought forward a lot of issues. What's the relevance of data? How is data collected, elaborated, exploited? What is relevant, what is not relevant data? So all these discussions have been put forward by the process of digitization. The second concept, digitalization, that means that basically we use more digital technologies to change a business model, meaning that nowadays we are able, for example, to work more from remote. We have seen it with COVID-19. We are able to delocalize employees, so the employee does not need anymore to sit in the office and to work from there. Thanks to digitalization, it has the possibility to work even from somewhere else. And all these discussions have brought forward questions like, okay, if we are used to think of employees as value-driving factors for a company, now what happens if the employee does not work physically from that country anymore, he works from somewhere else? What will happen in the moment employees will more and more be replaced by artificial intelligence? Will the company lose some functions? Will it still have the same functions performed by artificial intelligence? All these issues have come up more and more in the recent times. And finally, digital transformation. This is what actually we are talking about, and this is what basically refers to the fact that businesses are able to strategically transform in a manner that they can basically serve better the customers. They can collect better the data, remember from before, and they can understand and they can change their business model in order to provide something to the customer, where the customer is even part, or in some cases, of the value creation of the business. And all this has brought forward the questions that also Professor Marcus Livio was referring before about users' participations, marketing intangibles, significant economic presence that the OECD has been also working on. Now, what were the conclusions by the OECD? The OECD has proposed two pillars as an approach to solve these issues. On one side, pillar one, that was already explained by Professor Marcus Livio. Basically, this provides more taxing rights to the market jurisdictions. How it does that? Basically, it has amount A, that is a former apportionment sort of tax collection, whereby that is applied only to highly digitalized businesses or consumer-facing businesses, and basically you have a physical, you have taxation also where you don't have any physical presence in a country, and that country will most probably be the country where you have revenues. Then you have amount B and C, that is basically the arm's length principle as we know it today under the current transfer pricing rules, eventually improved by some simplifications under amount B and some binding dispute resolution under amount C. So what does it mean? It means that if pillar one goes ahead the way that is conceived nowadays, we basically will have the current system, the arm's length principle will not disappear, it will stay as it is, but we will have on top of the current system a new form of taxation based on a former apportionment mechanism. Pillar two instead is a pillar that provides, is a system that provides more taxing rights to the residence countries. And that's why the US, for example, is a big fan of pillar one, because basically it's also in line with the rules that were introduced by the US. So pillar one, more taxing rights to the markets. Pillar two, more taxing rights to the residents. Now, if we want to have some consideration,
I think Raffaele has frozen also right now, or yeah. He was really talking about the pillars and which countries are interested in each one of them. Let's hope that we can resolve this technical issue. However, we are in 4 different places right now. So São Paulo, Rio, Brasilia, and Vienna. So let's hope he comes back. Yeah, he has fallen.
Jonathan, if I may, I could address some interesting topics that was announced by the U.S. Treasury this week, and this is something really interesting to discuss while we are waiting Professor Raffaele.
Yes.
All right. Okay, getting back. So, as I said, the U.S. Treasury delivered a note this week saying that all negotiations regarding Action 1, especially Pillar 1, was put on hold. What does it mean? In fact, the U.S. government said all projects that are delivered by OECD, especially Pillar 1 and Action 1, is focused on American companies, the giants American high digitalized companies. We can say Google, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon. And this is something really, this is not something new. As we know, many interesting, innovative concepts that was launched in the BEPS project as the MLI wasn't agreed by the United States. Raffaele, please.
Raffaele is back. Just to let you know what we discussed between this time. Marcos Livio was talking about the policy note from the USA this week, stating that they are withdrawing from Pillar 1 negotiations right now.
Yes, I'm very sorry. It seems that my laptop got disconnected. The Wi-Fi connection was not working anymore. It's Friday afternoon in Vienna, and even the Wi-Fi does not work anymore. But what point did you lose me? What I don't know.
You were talking about which pillar was leaning towards what. So you were saying, oh, Pillar 1 is more towards to the to the consumers, and Pillar 2 to the market, to the resident state.
Okay, that's great. So after that, I was just making some considerations. If we want to make some considerations about the work of the OECD, first of all, we have to underline that we need to recognize the hard work done by the OECD in these years, and the work that is currently doing is a really tough work. Why? Because on the one hand, there are countries demanding more taxing rights at the source or at the market level. Other countries are demanding more taxing rights at the residence level. And even when we are talking about a possible solution at market level, there are some countries that still like the arm's-length principle, some other countries that don't like it and want for more apportionment. So I think it's quite tough, the position of the OECD, and we should recognize the hard work that is done by this international organization in order to solve all these issues. Now, where we want to be a little bit critical and controversial about the solutions that have been provided, I think, first of all, we have to underline that highly digitalized businesses cannot be ring-fenced. So it is not possible to say whether a company is highly digitalized or is not that highly digitalized. If you want to make an example, of course, if I tell you Facebook, you will say, yes, it's a highly digitalized company. But when I tell you that a normal restaurant starts selling its products online because of the lockdown by the COVID-19 and collects information about the preferences of the customers that are buying his products online and uses these preferences in order to improve his food that is sold, then would you tell me that there's no highly digitalized businesses? I believe there is not much difference between a company that does that and a company like Facebook. So both of them could be considered highly digitalized businesses. So how far does the definition of highly digitalized businesses go? I think that's really difficult to be said. Another point is that this does not seem to be really much of a principle-based solution. It seems that there are various principles behind this solution provided by the OECD, but there is not a single principle. And without a single principle, will be difficult to basically decide what would be the technicalities of this solution. Is taxation in line with value creation? This is something that was said many times during the BEPS project. And of course, what is value creation is something we should question ourselves, because value creation is something that basically happens from the moment in which a company basically gets its products, its raw materials, or whatever it needs in order to produce something, up to the moment that that company sells that product or service and markets that product or service. It sells it and makes a nice marketing campaign. What happens afterwards is not value creation, is value consumption. So in that case, we should question ourselves whether a customer is always contributing to value creation or is simply consuming. In some cases, the customers are contributing to the value, but those are really specific cases that we need to look case by case. What happens to the relevance of users and data? It seems that in this solution under amount A and amount B and pillar 1 and pillar 2, there is no reference anymore to users and to data. There are many other points that we can make, but I'm afraid that the time is running, and I wanted to make some points when it comes to the impact of COVID-19, what COVID-19 will mean for this project. First of all, what are we seeing with COVID-19? We are seeing, first of all, that MNEs are restructuring their supply chains. We are seeing that unemployment is increasing. We are seeing that more people are working remotely, that there is an unprecedented level of uncertainty. So there is less investments, less innovations, less patenting, less developments in this direction by companies. Countries are in a recession, although some countries are doing better than others, and that there is more debt and higher risks to factor in the economy. What does this mean for taxation of highly digitalized businesses? Well, first of all, from a political level, it is difficult, much more difficult under the current situation to reach an agreement, for the simple fact that every country is having its own problems. And when you have these issues, basically you tend to reach less of an agreement with other countries and rather to focus on your own issues and your own solutions. We have seen indeed the US stepping out of this project, at least for Pillar 1, and this is one of the basically one of the first outcomes of the COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 on these projects. And also what's tricky is that countries need more and more revenues in order to face the crisis that they are undergoing. But on the other hand, they also need to save businesses. So they cannot be too aggressive and they cannot ask for too many taxes on their taxpayers. Otherwise, there will be no employment anymore. From a technical level, what does COVID-19 mean? First of all, it is clear that not all the digitalized businesses are the same, meaning that Booking.com is not the same as Amazon and the same as Netflix. Some companies are somehow gaining more out of this crisis, and some companies are losing more out of this crisis. What does this mean for amount A, where everything that is highly digitalized seems to be under this form of taxation? What does it mean for amount B, where we said before, as Professor Livio said before, you have to have fixed margins, fixed profitability margins. What does it mean in a moment, in a period in which companies are making less profits, are even in a loss-making situation? How can you define a fixed profitability? What does it mean for amount C, where we said countries should get an agreement over binding dispute resolution in a period in which countries are more focused on their own solutions? We see, of course, proliferation of digital service taxes. So this is the immediate outcome of all this. They are perceived to be more simple and more effective. So they seem to be more successful than what is the result under amount A and amount B and Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. So a lot of countries are implementing digital service taxes. To conclude on all this, we have the aim of giving more taxing rights to the markets. At least this seems to be one of the aims of all these discussions. I'm not really sure whether this aim can be achieved with Pillar 1, the way that is conceived nowadays. Probably it can be achieved with more digital service taxes, with more equalization levy kind of taxes. We need to work on the current double tax treaties in order to also amend them and to avoid double taxation that is generated by these new taxes. And it can be also solved by means of amending VAT. So also VAT can provide more taxing rights to market jurisdictions. Suggestions for the future: work more on VAT, work more on multilaterally agreed digital service taxes, and amend the tax treaties in order to avoid double taxation. Thank you very much. I hope this was this was not disappointing. I'm sorry for the technical issues I had, and looking forward to the discussion.
No, it was great, Raffaele. I was really, this really ties in within the scope that we are planning. So Marcus Livio gave the general overview, then you went to the companies and the business side, and then to the outcome of this. And for sure, Liziane will have now some really interesting inputs, and I have some inputs as well so far. So Liziane, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Initially, I'd like to thank my friend Jonathan for the invitation. I am very glad to be here in the presence of such an outstanding professor, Dr. Raffaele Petruzzi. It was very nice to meet you. Dr. Marcos Livio, it was nice to see you again. And thank you all who are here to debate the headmost topic. Congratulations, Jonathan. Congratulations, Neymar, for the initiative. It is truly a great honor to participate in this debate on the taxation of a highly digitalized business at the time of COVID-19. Currently, we are discussing in Brazil and in some other countries the weight of some digital business. We are discussing here fake news, digital robots, and the influence of such technologies in our election and our thinking and in our choices. In the other hand, the good side, during this global health crisis, we saw more than ever before how much we are dependent on technology, on digital business. We depend on technology to learn. We depend on technology to study, to meet here today, to have fun, to meet friends, to meet family. So now, more than before, we are sure that we depend on everyday activities on the technology. So this debate on this topic is really important and up to date. We are talking about here, and Professor Petruzzi told this, not about digitalized business, but about highly digitalized business. And he said it's difficult to say exactly what should be, but in my point of view, this means that we are talking about a high level of technology, and normally create in developed countries, and a large number of them within the United States. And we could see in the presentations that we have some policies that come from OECD and from European Union that show us some rules, how we could treat these, how we could act, residents or market, that so that we don't have agreement in this issue, even among developed countries. So it's a hard issue to discuss. Developing in less developed countries, most of the time, like Brazil, they are not able to create this type of technology. But some of them, despite how can I say, despite not having a high level of education or touch, they are good market for digitalized business, for high digitalized business. So we have this situation, we have these policies over the world, we have the pillars from OECD, we have some concerns about to follow OECD or some countries that are taking their own policies. And we have some disagreement and some taxes already allowed by European Union, for example, the French GAFA. And on the other hand, we have the United States, naturally, which that's a country which does not agree with those policy. And the professor Max Livio told us today some news about that. Coming back to Brazil, our tax system is so outdated that we are still discussing whether one of our VAT, and the professor Raffaele Petruzzi told us about this importance of VAT, but we are discussing about if one of our VAT, state tax on goods and some service, or the municipal tax on service should burden digital transactions. In other words, we have difficulties in applying general taxes on the digital service because our taxes are very old and inflexible. And nor do we have specific taxes for this type of activity. Anyway, I think like other countries, like other developed or more like other developing countries, we have two sides to consider. We cannot tax excessively and without a strategy, because we can, through excessive charge, reduce even more the access of Brazilian to technology, to knowledge, and generate more underdevelopment, socioeconomic problems, and some problems to economy and business. And on the other hand, with no taxation or with no certitude, the country may be exploited as a market unable of developing its own technology. The presentation of Dr. Petruzzi was really very interesting and instructive. And I think that a country with so many particularities like Brazil should learn from foreign experience, should try, as he said, to use VAT to address, to try to tax in the market, such kind of business. But we should not simply follow some pattern of other countries, even if it's successful. I think it's necessary to adapt to the reality of a big country struggling to its development. So I'd like to ask to Professor Petruzzi an advice. What should be the strategy? Which policy you think should be adopted by a country like Brazil in relation to really digitalized business? We should improve our VAT. We should try to tax our markets, or no, because we need technology, we need knowledge. So I'd like to make this question to Dr. Petruzzi. And if possible, I'd like, I don't know if now or after, I'd like to make a question as well to Professor Livio. May I?
Yes. No, because actually I was planning you can make a question to Livio, then I'll talk a bit, and then we
Okay.
go from Livio to Raffaele, and yeah, I mean.
And my question to my friend Livio, first of all, congratulations for our presentation. It was intriguing and enlightening how things are, about the news, about the pillars. It was very interesting. And I would like to ask you about the main changes to be made in Brazilian tax system to correctly address the digital economy. If you think it should be done under our tax reform. That's my question. And thank you again, Jonathan, for the invitation, and congratulations for the presentation. It was very, very interesting.
Thank you, Liziane. I'm really glad for your comments, because actually I have a counterpoint on your idea behind the Brazilian system. And I have some opinions also on the future and all of that. So it will be a really nice debate. Because actually what I think is that in Brazil, we have many means in order to tax the highly digitalized business. What I want to say is, for example, we have the tax over financial operations that deals over the foreign exchange. So each transaction that in which money goes from Brazil to another country, you have some tax over that. And when you pay with credit card, when you pay with international banking transfer or anything like that, you're being taxed in some extent. And from the other part, the federal government has something that is really the basis for the DST in general. Because we have the PIS/COFINS, which are federal contributions over a turnover, over revenue, not over profit or anything like that. So I think we have some means in order to address that. Obviously, we lack consistent VAT relating to those rules. We had some modifications over here, but I really don't think we have addressed properly the problem on the VAT level. However, the idea of the digital contribution that we have in Brazil, which is mimicking the DST, I don't think it really is necessary right now. And I also believe that maybe the problem of Brazil is addressing the location of the profits, the location of the revenues. We don't have proper PE rules. We don't have proper residence rules. We don't have proper establishment rules. So this, to me, is really a problem within the Brazilian perspective. And this really it goes alongside what Liziane told. And moving to what Raffaele told, each company is highly digitalized. Is digitalized in some extent, but highly digitalized, yeah, you have few companies. However, the idea here might be that those companies, they are always disrupting things. So they are also disrupting taxation. And now in COVID, everyone is disrupting even more. As I believe Raffaele said, some companies are gaining, some companies are not gaining right now. And they're always evolving, always adapting, and always disrupting. And I use the word disrupting here because they are disrupting regulations, they are disrupting taxation also. And maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and really thinking about how those companies operate. Because it was already said here, they don't profit. I mean, Amazon lasted, I believe, 8 years before making a profit. And even worse, even right now, they're not actually paying proper taxes in the USA because they have some incentive, the losses carried over. They have some incentives to research and development. So yes, we have that problem. Uber, the horizon of profitability is 20 years. So in those 20 years, they are only accumulating losses. Tesla, for example, is currently at loss. So how are you going to stay with the idea of profit taxes on this environment? I believe we have to target each business model in a specific way. And this may be the way to go. So instead of just relying on income tax, VAT, all those things, we may have to rethink the whole idea of the taxation systems. We are talking about the tax reform here in Brazil on the consumption and on the VAT end, but in 5 years, I believe it will be obsolete. So we have to keep looking forward to the future instead of looking back to the immediate past or the current situation. And I have to add another thing. Livio talked about something that, to me, it's really interesting when he told that the United States is not, trying to deal in everything and trying to discuss everything, because actually United States is really on a good position of that. Okay, we have the Chinese companies that are really huge in China, but we have the American companies that are almost everywhere except China. So the United States always is going to keep on dragging their feet and trying to have the residents as a full and ideal scenario. So obviously, I just wanted to comment, have a glimpse of the future, and really try to build up to thinking about how to transform the taxation systems. BEPS was not successful on Action 1 at all, I have to say. And they are trying with the BEPS 2.0 or the 2 pillars to address some of that. So I would like us to continue pursuing that discussion and trying to here come up with a different outcome or a different solution. But it's really been some interesting points made by Marcos Livio, by Raffaele, by Liziane, and I think now we can get the debate going. Thank you all. So I think you address it first, Raffaele. So Raffaele, you have the floor now.
Thank you. I think we can discuss for a long time, but I just want to make, first of all, a point clear. When we talk about all these issues, it seems to me that we always are referring to the same companies. If you talk about digital economy issues, it seems that you're talking about Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix, these companies here. But to me, when we're talking about digitalization issues, we're talking about every company in the world. In few years, if a company doesn't get digitalized, it will not exist anymore. Think of, as I mentioned before, the case of a restaurant. If a restaurant did not get on a delivery system, maybe by using a website and by using orders online, it would not probably survive to the crisis. So we are talking about basically every company in the world. If we are not talking about every company in the world, and if we are trying to find out a solution that works with the few companies that we have in mind nowadays, in 5 years, 10 years maximum, we need to reform the system again. We need to find a BEPS 3, a BEPS 4, a BEPS whatever, in order to face the issues of the companies that will come in few years, because there are business models that we don't know yet that will be really successful in few years. So if you think at companies like TikTok, a few years ago, they were not even there, and now they are really successful. If you think at the business like Facebook, a few years ago, it was really successful, and now Facebook makes profits with Instagram. It doesn't make profits anymore with Facebook. So we're talking about a world, and the business models change every day. A business changes every day. If it does not change, it will not survive for long. So if we want to find a solution that refers only to specific business models, I'm sorry, but I think in few years, we will need to change everything again. So what I would
But Raffaele, just to interrupt you, but don't you think that maybe the idea of joining minds, the business side and the tax administration on the other side, and trying to find avenues in order to have a fair share of taxation of those companies might be the way to go. Because as you said, there are many different business models, there are many different supply chains now. First, we have many layers. Now we have some decentralized idea of a company. So I think that we are, if we go back and just keep referring back to profit tax, income tax, VAT and all of that, I think we're not going to reach anywhere, because every day things are changing and we have to every time adjust our system. When we say the fair taxation should be like that, and how are we going to understand the monetization of each company might be the way to go. Because as you said, Facebook monetizes in a way and Google monetizes in a different way, for example. So people say, oh, every time are the same companies such as Google, Facebook, Amazon, whatever, but the way that they make money is really different. So we cannot tax them in the same way, because we're going to have different outcomes, and the gap between the companies and the way that they do business will only grow. So I was just trying to make this point to go alongside yours.
Absolutely, I think it absolutely makes sense. The problem is that if we want to conceive a new system now, it will be difficult to find it. Why? Because if you put a white paper in front of each one of us participating to this discussion, and you can imagine it, if you replicate that among all people that are involved in this discussion nowadays, they will draw everyone a different solution. They will draw everyone a different picture. So if we want to, and none of them will be wrong. None of these solutions, since we are talking about the future, since we're talking about something that does not exist, none of them will be wrong. All of them will be right. So it will be difficult to convince someone that one of the solutions is better than all the others. So I think changing for somehow changing the entire system is something that ideally should work. In practice, most probably it will not. So because of course, if you would be the one deciding on the future system and everybody else would simply need to agree with you, so if you would be the king of the world, as Leonardo DiCaprio was also saying in a famous movie, then of course, that would be perfect.
But we have America and we have OECD. So if they have specific models in order to deal with that, everyone has to follow in line.
I'm afraid that many countries will not agree that America and the OECD should be the kings of the world. I'm just afraid of that.
China.
But anyway, even if we imagine that America should decide everything, I think that still the various policymakers in the US will have different views of what the solution should be. Now back to Liziane's question, the really easy question on what the Brazil should do in order to change this. I'm afraid that I would need much more days to answer that question, but personally, what
a developing country in general.
Yes, I think what we really need to do is, first of all, start thinking how VAT could help us in order to get some more consumption taxes in the market jurisdictions, because we are talking about consumption at the end of the day. I'm not a VAT expert, but I think that could be some solutions there. If you really want to use corporate income taxes in order to get more revenues, be aware that on one side you need to collect more taxes, on the other you need not to scare investments into your country. And considering that corporate income taxes does not generate that much revenues into a country, if I were a policymaker of a country, I would say, okay, if corporate income taxes are something that don't give you much revenues per se, but have the potential of attracting investments by means of more employments into the country, more investments in patents and in research and development of the country, that then will generate other taxes and social contributions, then I would not be too much aggressive with saying we should have more corporate income taxes. But if you really want to have more corporate income taxes, I think the solution could be, first of all, digital service taxes in order to see how it works, or a sort of withholding tax on digital services. But this should be somehow agreed also with other countries in order to have also relief from double taxation or from multiple taxation. The problem for these companies, for the companies that we are all calling in highly digitalized, is that these withholding taxes are levied on the gross amount of the revenues. But those companies have expenses, so they cannot recover those withholding taxes. It's like for banks taxing interest income. They cannot get rid of the double taxation because they will be, the interest income are taxed on the gross amount, but the profits of the bank are taxed on the net amount. So they will never get back that, and that's why there are not withholding taxes in many cases in the case of banks. So if you really want to impose withholding taxes or digital service taxes, think also of a way to get rid of double taxation, otherwise you will not get much investments. Last but not least, improve your transfer pricing rules, improve your anti-avoidance rules, and
you had to talk about transfer pricing, Raffaele.
we need another event for that. And
yes.
finally, improve your cooperative compliance mechanisms. Sit down, find ways better to sit down with the taxpayers to understand what their business model is, how it works, where they generate value, and where they should be taxed, because every business is different, and the taxpayer is the one that usually has more information over the business model. And if you don't find a way, if you don't have a way to sit down and understand the business model of the taxpayer, it will be difficult to levy any tax and to be successful in levying any tax. So just in few minutes, what a developing country in general can do in order to reform the system in a way that can actually collect more money.
Thank you. Marcos, Livio, you want to? Yeah, your microphone is off.
Just few remarks regarding what Raffaele delivered. So, first of all, Brazil has never faced BEPS. Base erosion and profit shifting wasn't a problem to Brazil, and it isn't a problem to Brazil at all. Brazil has been following a really solid tax policy regarding international taxation, and this policy is based on withholding tax. I know that you don't like withholding tax, Raffaele, but it works, and it works really well to Brazil. We can say that in the last 30 or 40 years, Brazil has using withholding tax with a really success. Then why changing this tax policy? If the Brazilian economy is based on commodities, Brazilian economy is not based in intangibles. Brazilian company is based on commodities, and so digitalized economy is just touching Brazil in terms of using of data, if I can say. I think that Brazil would follow many, like India, or I think India is the best example of what to do. Except transfer pricing, that I have to agree with Raffaele, Brazil could change something. Not the model, but could change something. Regarding digitalized economy, I would say that Brazil should go on with withholding taxing, especially including the suggestion of the United Nations model that is to include Article 12A, creating digital PE and creating a specific article that could say that service tax could be taxed in Brazil, in the source country. Other comments that I should say is that the VAT is really unfair in terms of design thinking tax system. The Brazilian economy is based on VAT, and VAT is something really hard for poor people, and increasing or changing the tax model for enforcement VAT would be something really unfair for this part of the population. Maybe Brazil could updating some concepts regarding permanent establishments. Brazil could updating some concerns regarding transfer pricing, but not following the way of VAT, because these could just how can I say, be effective, but would be really unfair in terms of who would be paying the accounts. Just to comment, just a final comment. Business models are changing really fast, and COVID-19 was something to be researched in the future. But I can't see some strong changes to Brazil. As I said, Brazil is based on commodities, and I can't see strong changes regarding how the digitalized economy would affect Brazil. But there is something really important, and I really believe that the consumer marketing should be taken into consideration when you are talking about sharing taxing rights. I can't believe that you could disconsiderate the population of Brazil, the population of India, the population of China, in order to thinking about following the model, the framework that is used in the last century. And something has to be changed in terms of why not considering the mining of data and analytics of the data that is extracted from the population to rethinking nexus. And this is something really interesting to think. Just provocating, Professor Raffaele, just provocating.
No, I'm really much enjoying this discussion, and thanks a lot for your inputs. I completely agree on the point that markets eventually should get more taxing rights. I just think that they should get more taxing rights when it is right that they get more taxing rights, when it's a principle-based solution. So I would basically suggest to keep working on principle-based solutions, because if we have the solution that we should just get more taxing rights just for the sake of getting more taxing rights, then of course every government will try to get more taxing rights even where it is not entitled to, and the result is simply that there will be multiple taxation. So let's try to find a way where that it is right to get more taxing rights. It is a principle-based solution. So I agree on that point. The point on withholding taxes, as I mentioned before, I'm not against withholding taxes. I'm basically saying that if there should be withholding taxes, we should be sure that we also find a mechanism to avoid double taxation. We have withholding taxes on dividends, on interest, on royalties. These are fine. These are easy way to levy taxes when it's too difficult to levy taxes. And this could be really well the solution also in these situations that we are discussing. But please, as we have done with dividend, interest, and royalties, also in the case of DSTs, let's try to find a way whereby one country levies the taxes and the other one gives a credit for those taxes. Otherwise, there will simply be multiple taxation. On the VAT point, and this is a more of a general aspect, you rightly say it's unfair to levy VAT because then the consumer gets hurt by this. This is correct. However, if you levy withholding taxes without giving relief from double taxation, if you levy more taxes because of amount A, if you levy more taxes because of Pillar 2, who do you think is gonna go that extra cost by the company to? The services will be more expensive. So the taxes are a cost for a company, and a company, in order to pay taxes, needs to increase the price of its products or services. Otherwise, it will go bankrupt. So as much as you increase VAT, and you think that increasing VAT is a problem, it could be indeed, but it is a problem also for the other kind of taxes if we don't get rid of double taxation. So I think what my willingness is to find a way to levy more taxes, also for the market jurisdictions, but being careful in not having double taxation, because the cost of that double taxation will be paid by the customers as well.
Yeah, I believe that we have to go to maybe some final remarks if anyone wants to address anything further, because we really ran out of time. Raffaele has already suggested to do something on transfer pricing, so now we have to think about that. We still have probably 3 or 4 events that can be held on July. So maybe we'll try to do something on transfer pricing on highly digitalized business or something like that. So let's keep our minds together and do something like that. Marcos, Livio, Liziane, do you want to make any final comments or any final say?
May I?
What? Sorry. Yeah, if you want to make any final comment on 1 minute, so we can.
1 minute, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to say it was very interesting. And in fact, we have this kind of doubt how to tax VAT, withhold, and income tax. But I think we should also think about tax in the same level of other kind of business. Because in Brazil, I agree, we have it's too much VAT, but in my opinion, it's not fair if you have a high level of VAT for other kind of business and highly digitalized business we cannot achieve because they have a different model of working of business. So at first step, I think we should think about give the same level, and if we are not able, then we should think about a kind of special taxation like French GAFA, or in Brazil we have seed royalties, a kind of contribution that's not for this, but could be, in this sense. But it was very enlightening. Thank you for the presentations. I learned a lot. Thank you again, Jonathan, for the invitation.
Thank you, Marcos Livio.
I'd just like to say that OECD once come up with a solution regarding Pillar 1, and the world will see the digital service tax being spread out to many, many countries. And double taxation will something that will increase a lot. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you, Liziane. Professor Raffaele, it was a great pleasure to see you again.
Raffaele, final remarks?
Well, first of all, I think I really enjoyed the discussions. You guys are living in an amazing country. You are really lucky to live in. I was unfortunately only in Rio, but I hope in the future I will be able to visit more of your city. You live in an amazing country, and you are doing an amazing job, all of you, in raising the discussions over these issues, raising the awareness of these issues, and improving the knowledge at the level of academia, in the governments. So that's an extremely important job that you all need to keep doing. We all need to keep doing, and I'm really glad that I could contribute to these discussions. So thanks a lot, Marcus, Liziane, Jonathan, for the interesting discussions, and I really look forward to see you next time, hopefully in your beautiful country.
Thank you, Raffaele. Thank you, Raffaele. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Liziane. I have to say, just as a final remark, this was really an interesting event. I believe that the common goal of us all is really to look towards the future and see after the pandemic what can happen, what at least should happen in our opinion, and try to really address this part of the economy which is growing, and that we have to be really attentive of, and how to elaborate rules and really understanding what we should do, as in the case of Marcos Livio as a judge, in the case of Liziane as a tax administration member, in maybe in my case, and in the case of Raffaele as academics and working consultants. So I have to say we have a really full agenda. Still today, everyone, I hope you can come here at 6 o'clock p.m. Brazilian time. We'll have the event of Professor Daniel, which will be really interesting. On Monday, we are receiving at 5:30 p.m. Professor Casal Tanabais, which is a really well-renowned Portuguese professor of taxation. On Tuesday, we have Paulo Aires Barreto at 6 o'clock p.m. in a really interesting event about tax planning and a logic, semantic, legal constructivism. And on Wednesday, we will have the event at 2 p.m. of Professor Mariana with an American professor. Then on 6 p.m., we have the Professor Walter and Carlos event. And on Thursday, we have the event on law and elections with the former Minister of Justice of Brazil and former Minister of the Superior Tribunal of Elections, Torquato Jardim, and many others. And on Friday, we'll have our time slot here to discuss more on taxation and everything, and Professor Daniel as well. So everyone is really welcome. I'm really glad for all the audience and all the questions. And hopefully everyone is well with their families, and everything will pass, and we'll be together personally in the future for many more events. Thank you.
Thank you.